being this is a 44 Magnum, the most powerful handgun in the world, and would blow your head clean off.
Clint Eastwood has spent over 6 decades shaping the silver screen, whether as a steely-eyed cowboy, a tough cop with a catchphrase, or a thoughtful director with an eye for quiet intensity. But long before he was making classics, Eastwood was just another kid in the dark, watching movies and falling in love with the craft of storytelling. For a man who's played so many unforgettable roles, it's fascinating to ask, what kind of films inspired him? What stories made him sit up in his seat and think, that's how it's done? Clint Eastwood has occasionally let fans in on that secret. In interviews and tributes, he's named a few movies that left a mark, films that helped shape his worldview as both actor and director. Some are gritty, some are grand. All are masterclasses in character, tone, and emotion, the very things Eastwood would go on to master himself. So today, we're counting down 6 of Clint Eastwood's all-time favorite films. The ones that didn't just entertain him, but helped define the artist he became. Let's dive in, starting with a film from a man Eastwood once called one of his greatest mentors. Number 6, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. At number 6 on Clint Eastwood's list is a film you might not expect from a man known for Western standoffs and gritty realism.
Stop! Will you tell these fools I'm not crazy? Make them listen to me before it's too late!
Invasion of the Body Snatchers, released in 1956, is a paranoid science fiction classic, and it just so happens to be one of Eastwood's favorites. The reason? It's not just about the aliens. It's about who made the film, Don Siegel. Siegel would later go on to direct Eastwood in 5 different films, most notably Dirty Harry in 1971. But back in the 50s, Eastwood was just starting out. In fact, he had a tiny, blink and you'll miss it, uncredited role in Invasion of the Body Snatchers as a lab technician. That moment might be minor, but for Eastwood, it marked the beginning of a professional relationship that would shape his entire approach to filmmaking. Eastwood has often said, "Everything I know about directing, I learned from Don Siegel and Sergio Leone." That's no small praise. And when you look closely at Invasion of the Body Snatchers, you start to see why Siegel left such an impression. The film tells the story of a small-town doctor who slowly realizes that people in his community are being replaced by emotionless alien duplicates. It's tense. It's eerie. But what really struck Eastwood was Siegel's economical style. There was no fat on this film. Every scene served a purpose. The pacing is tight, the performances are natural, and the mood of growing dread is expertly crafted.
Miles, where do they come from?
I don't know.
Eastwood has always favored efficiency and realism in his own directing. He's famous for doing few takes and keeping things moving on set. That's a trait he picked up watching Siegel work. Siegel didn't waste time with elaborate tricks or over-direction. He trusted his actors and relied on story and tone. In Invasion of the Body Snatchers, that tone is everything. The film captures the anxiety of the era, released during the Cold War, when fears of infiltration and loss of identity were running high. But it never leans into sensationalism. The horror builds quietly, just as Eastwood's thrillers and dramas often do. Think about Mystic River or Play Misty for Me. They're tense without being flashy. That same DNA runs through Siegel's 1956 film. Eastwood also admired how the movie balanced genre elements with genuine emotion. The characters feel real, even as their world is falling apart. That grounded approach is something Eastwood would carry forward throughout his career. His films may have gunslingers or crooked cops, but they're always rooted in emotional truth. And then there's the theme of individuality under threat, of people losing themselves. That motif pops up in Eastwood's own stories, especially in films where characters struggle with identity or integrity. In Gran Torino, for instance, the fear isn't about aliens taking over. It's about losing cultural identity, losing control, and facing obsolescence. The echo of Body Snatchers is subtle, but it's there. What makes this pick so personal is the connection to Eastwood's beginnings. He was still a nobody when Body Snatchers came out, just starting to understand what kind of actor or director he might be. Watching Don Siegel pull off a tense, compelling story on a modest budget left a huge impression. It showed Eastwood that you didn't need spectacle to hold an audience. You just needed focus, discipline, and a good story. Later, when Siegel directed Dirty Harry, Eastwood was ready. He'd learned from the best. And even after Siegel's passing, Eastwood continued to speak of him with deep admiration. Naming Invasion of the Body Snatchers as one of his favorite films wasn't just about the movie. It was about honoring the man who helped shape his career and his voice as a filmmaker. For Eastwood, Body Snatchers is more than science fiction. It's a masterclass in lean, fearless storytelling, and a tribute to the mentor who taught him how to tell stories that linger long after the credits roll. Number 5, Casablanca. Clint Eastwood might be known for his steely glares and dusty westerns, but at number 5 on his list is a film that proves he's got a romantic side too. Casablanca, 1942.
I'd like to be on it.
Why? What's in Lisbon?
Could slip her to America.
The legendary wartime drama, starring Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman, has captivated generations with its mix of love, loss, and resistance. For Eastwood, Casablanca stands as a shining example of classic Hollywood at its finest. It's a film he's praised not just for its storytelling, but for its unforgettable characters, iconic performances, and enduring emotional power. As a young movie fan in the 1940s, Eastwood saw Casablanca in theaters, and it left a mark. He's spoken fondly of Humphrey Bogart's performance as Rick Blaine, a hardened nightclub owner in war-torn Morocco who still harbors a broken heart. That kind of character, tough on the outside, deeply emotional beneath the surface, is exactly the type Eastwood would go on to master. Rick's reluctant heroism, his journey from cynical loner to selfless savior, mirrors many of Eastwood's own characters in later films. Eastwood has mentioned that Bogart's ability to carry a scene with minimal movement or dialogue resonated with him. He could say more with a glance than most actors could in 5 pages, Eastwood once said. That quiet intensity is something Eastwood clearly took to heart. His own performances, especially in films like Unforgiven and $1 Million Baby, channel that same understated power. Bogart, for Eastwood, was the gold standard of tough guy vulnerability. Beyond performance, Casablanca also appealed to Eastwood's deep respect for craftsmanship. The script is famously sharp with lines like, "Here's looking at you, kid," and "We'll always have Paris," becoming part of cinematic legend. Eastwood, who has often preferred lean, no-nonsense dialogue in his own screenplays, admired how Casablanca packed so much feeling and meaning into such tight exchanges. It was storytelling economy at its best, something he would emulate as both actor and director. And then there's the theme of sacrifice. Rick gives up the woman he loves for a greater cause, sending Ilsa off with her resistance leader husband in the hope of defeating the Nazis. Eastwood has always appreciated characters who make hard moral choices. His own films often deal with redemption, honor, and the cost of doing the right thing, even when it's painful. In Casablanca, that emotional dilemma is front and center. It's not just a love story. It's a story about standing up for something bigger than yourself, a theme that runs through much of Eastwood's work. There's also a personal layer. Bogart wasn't just an acting influence. He was a Hollywood rebel, a man who forged his own path and didn't always play by the studio's rules. Eastwood, too, is famously independent, founding his own production company, Malpaso, to make the films he wanted without interference. Bogart's legacy as both a star and a maverick likely appealed to Eastwood on a professional level as well. Over the years, Eastwood has listed Casablanca as a film he returns to again and again. It just holds up, he said. And he's right. Decades after its release, Casablanca still hits all the right notes. It's timeless, beautifully acted, and emotionally honest. Just the kind of film Eastwood has spent his life trying to make in his own way. So while it might seem surprising to see Casablanca on Clint Eastwood's favorites list, it makes perfect sense. It represents everything he values in cinema: great storytelling, moral complexity, unforgettable characters, and the courage to say goodbye when it matters most. Even the man with no name has a soft spot for a classic love story, especially one with guts. Number 4, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
Without me, you two would die here more miserable than rats.
Leave him alone.
For Clint Eastwood, Few films cut as deep into the human condition as The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, 1948. At number 4 on his list, this John Huston classic is more than a rugged adventure. It's a grim meditation on greed, paranoia, and the breakdown of trust. And it's exactly the kind of story Eastwood has spent decades telling in his own way. Eastwood has cited John Huston as one of the directors who most influenced him. He admired Huston's ability to blend realism with myth, creating movies that felt grounded yet epic. Sierra Madre is a perfect example. It follows three desperate men, played by Humphrey Bogart, Tim Holt, and Walter Huston, on a dangerous quest for gold in the mountains of Mexico. At first, they're partners, but as the gold piles up, so does suspicion. What starts as camaraderie slowly rots into madness and betrayal. Eastwood was especially drawn to Bogart's performance as Fred C. Dobbs, a man eaten alive by paranoia. It was a different kind of role for Bogart, less heroic, more volatile, and Eastwood found it unforgettable. In interviews, he said the film showed a side of Bogart that was raw and fearless. That kind of risk-taking and performance left a lasting impression on Eastwood, who would later play characters like William Money in Unforgiven, men hardened by life and capable of terrible things. The theme of moral decay in Sierra Madre struck a chord with Eastwood early on. He said the movie taught him that greed is the root of all cinematic drama. And he wasn't joking. The film's descent into mistrust, culminating in Bogart's unhinged breakdown, foreshadowed many of Eastwood's own directorial efforts, where characters are pushed to the brink by their flaws. There's also a personal connection. Eastwood would later make White Hunter, Black Heart, 1990, a thinly veiled biopic of John Huston, where he played a fictionalized version of the director. That film explored the contradictions in Huston's personality, the mix of genius and recklessness, compassion and cruelty. It was Eastwood's way of paying tribute to the man who shaped his idea of what a filmmaker could be. Bold, flawed, and utterly committed to the story. From a technical standpoint, Eastwood respected Sierra Madre's gritty realism. Shot largely on location in Mexico, a rarity at the time, the film avoided studio gloss and embraced natural lighting and rugged terrain. Eastwood, who has always favored minimalism and authenticity, echoed this approach in his own work. Films like The Outlaw Josie Wales and $1 Million Baby rely on spare production design and raw emotion to do the heavy lifting. He saw in Sierra Madre a blueprint for truthful, powerful filmmaking. The film's ending also stuck with Eastwood. After all the death and betrayal, the surviving characters laugh as the wind scatters the gold dust into the desert. It's a moment of cosmic irony. Bitter and beautiful. Eastwood has said that great films don't just entertain, they haunt you. And that's exactly what Sierra Madre does. It leaves you thinking about how thin the line is between fortune and ruin, between friendship and fear. Even the film's most quoted line, badges. "We don't need no stinking badges," became part of movie history. And Eastwood, a man known for his own iconic catchphrases, always appreciated a line that could outlive the film itself. In short, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre gave Eastwood more than just inspiration. It gave him a standard. A story with grit, depth, and moral weight. A director who wasn't afraid to get dirty. And an actor who showed that sometimes the best performances are the most uncomfortable ones. For Clint Eastwood, that's what real cinema is about. And that's why this dusty tale of gold and greed earns its place in his top 6. Number 3. Citizen Kane. Clint Eastwood doesn't throw around the word masterpiece lightly. But when it comes to Citizen Kane, 1941, there's no hesitation. For Eastwood, Orson Welles' legendary debut isn't just a great film. It's a seismic moment in cinema that changed everything. And more importantly, it's a film that helps shape how Eastwood himself approaches storytelling, both in front of and behind the camera. At first glance, it might seem strange to associate Eastwood's gritty, minimalist style with Welles' sweeping, Baroque epic. But dig deeper, and the connection becomes clear. Eastwood has often praised Citizen Kane for its groundbreaking techniques, especially how every single innovation, from deep-focus cinematography to nonlinear narrative, was used to serve the story. It wasn't style for style's sake. That restraint, even amid technical brilliance, appealed to Eastwood's own philosophy. that every camera move, every edit, every line of dialogue should have purpose. He once said that Kane's emotional weight is what really makes it timeless, not just the innovation. The tragedy of Charles Foster Kane, a man who gains the world but loses his soul, mirrors many of the flawed characters Eastwood has portrayed and directed. There's a recurring theme in Eastwood's work: men haunted by past decisions, grappling with legacy, identity, and loneliness. Sound familiar? Citizen Kane did it first, and in some ways, did it best. Eastwood also admired Wells's audacity. At just 25 years old, Wells took on Hollywood's biggest studios, played a character who aged across decades, and redefined cinematic language, all while fighting off political and industry pressure. Eastwood, who came up through the studio system before carving out his own path as an independent filmmaker, saw Wells as a kindred spirit. Someone who wasn't afraid to buck the system, challenge expectations, and put the art before the politics. In interviews, Eastwood has expressed particular admiration for Wells's command over every aspect of filmmaking. He controlled the sound, the visuals, the editing. It was his vision, Eastwood once remarked. That level of creative ownership resonated deeply. As a director, Eastwood is known for his hands-on approach and lean production style, often shooting scenes in 1 or 2 takes, trusting instinct over over-polishing. While his method may differ from Wells's obsessive attention to detail, the goal is the same: to serve the story with total commitment. Another thing that impressed Eastwood was the ambiguity at the heart of Citizen Kane. The film doesn't spoon-feed its message. It invites viewers to interpret Kane's final word, Rosebud, for themselves. Eastwood, too, has always been drawn to ambiguity. Films like Mystic River, $1 Million Baby, and Unforgiven don't offer neat resolutions. They leave viewers wrestling with the aftermath, just as Kane does. It's a kind of emotional honesty that Eastwood credits Wells for pioneering. Eastwood has also acknowledged how Citizen Kane changed the public's perception of what a movie could be. Before Kane, most films were linear and stagey. Wells brought a painter's eye, a radio man's ear, and a novelist's sense of structure to the screen. He made film feel more alive, more complex. And that inspired a generation, including Eastwood, to take the medium seriously. There's also the legacy factor. Wells' battle to make Citizen Kane, and the career turbulence that followed, served as a cautionary tale. Eastwood took note. He knew the risks of pushing too hard, too fast in Hollywood. So while he admired Wells's artistic courage, he also learned the importance of playing the long game. That balance between ambition and survival has defined Eastwood's enduring success. Ultimately, Citizen Kane isn't just a film Clint Eastwood admires. It's a cornerstone of the cinematic language he speaks fluently. It's proof that movies can be more than entertainment. They can be art, they can be legacy, and they can whisper truths that echo for generations. That's what Eastwood strives for in his work, and that's why Citizen Kane sits so high on his list. Number 2, Shane.
Call me Shane.
Clint Eastwood has always been a cowboy at heart, so it's no surprise that his second favorite movie of all time is Shane, 1953, a film he's referenced repeatedly throughout his career, both in interviews and in his own work. Directed by George Stevens and starring Alan Ladd, Shane is more than just a classic Western to Eastwood. It's a deeply personal touchstone, a blueprint, a story that helped shape the kind of hero and the kind of filmmaker he would become. Shane tells the tale of a mysterious gunfighter who rides into a troubled frontier town and finds himself reluctantly drawn into a conflict between homesteaders and a ruthless cattle baron. For Eastwood, this setup had everything: moral tension, high-stakes action, and a haunting emotional undercurrent. But it was the character of Shane himself, quiet, solitary, noble, and ultimately doomed to keep riding, that left the deepest impression. Alan Ladd's performance struck a chord with Eastwood early on. As a young actor, Clint studied the way Ladd carried himself, not with loud bravado, but with calm purpose. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to dominate every scene. His silence spoke volumes. That stoic presence, that tight-lipped gravitas, would later become a signature trait of Eastwood's own screen persona, especially in the spaghetti westerns of the 1960s. But Eastwood's admiration for Shane goes beyond just performance. He saw in the film a perfect balance of myth and realism. On one hand, Shane is an archetypal western, complete with sweeping landscapes, black and white morality, and iconic shootouts. On the other hand, it's a deeply human story, one filled with longing, sacrifice, and the heavy cost of violence. Eastwood has often said that the best westerns are the ones that carry emotional weight. Shane carries plenty. When Eastwood made Pale Rider in 1985, he deliberately modeled the story after Shane. He even borrowed the structure. A mysterious man arrives, helps a vulnerable community, falls into quiet affection with a woman he can't have, and rides off alone. Critics at the time called Pale Rider a spiritual sequel to Shane, and Eastwood never denied the influence. In fact, he embraced it, saying, "There's nothing wrong with revisiting a classic, especially one that meant so much to me growing up." He's also spoken about the emotional power of the ending, the boy yelling, "Shane, come back," as the wounded hero disappears into the mountains. That final moment, Eastwood said, is what gave the film its staying power. It wasn't just about the gunfight. It was about what it meant. The tragedy of a man who can never settle down, who is forever cursed to wander because of what he's capable of. That sense of isolation, of inner conflict, would echo through many of Eastwood's roles, from the outlaw Josie Wales to Gran Torino. There's also the filmmaking itself. Eastwood admired George Stevens' direction, his patience, his attention to detail, and the way he let the landscape become a character in the story. Eastwood, who later became known for his economical, no-frills directing style, saw in Stevens a kind of poetic discipline. Shane didn't waste a frame. Everything mattered. Everything built toward that final ride. And finally, there's the theme that Eastwood would return to again and again: the price of violence. Shane doesn't glamorize killing. It shows the damage it leaves behind, the fractured families, the broken communities, the heroes who can never rest. That idea stuck with Eastwood. It informed films like Unforgiven, where the emotional toll of violence is front and center. So why does Shane rank so high on Clint Eastwood's list? Because it's not just a movie he loves. It's a movie that helped define him. It showed him what a Western could be. Not just entertainment, but myth, emotion, and moral complexity. And for a man who built his legacy in the saddle, that means everything. Number 1, The Searchers. At the very top of Clint Eastwood's list of favorite movies stands The Searchers, 1956.
Welcome home, Ethan.
The John Ford classic that helped redefine the Western genre, and arguably, Eastwood himself. Directed with sweeping vision and emotional complexity, and starring John Wayne in one of his most layered performances, The Searchers is a film that Eastwood has praised time and time again. Not just as a fan, but as a filmmaker who drew deep inspiration from its storytelling, its characters, and its uncompromising tone. Eastwood has often called The Searchers the gold standard of Westerns. That's no small praise from someone who's made a career out of challenging and evolving the genre. For him, The Searchers was the first Western to move beyond the simple good guy versus bad guy formula. It introduced moral ambiguity, emotional depth, and a troubled protagonist in Ethan Edwards, played by John Wayne, who is equal parts hero and haunted man. In interviews, Eastwood has pointed out that what makes The Searchers so powerful isn't just its breathtaking cinematography or epic scale, it's the darkness at its core. The story follows Ethan Edwards, a Civil War veteran who spends years searching for his kidnapped niece, only to face the question of whether he can accept her once she's found. That emotional tension, rooted in Ethan's racism and obsession, gives the film a psychological intensity that was groundbreaking in its time. Eastwood admired how Ford and Wayne weren't afraid to portray Ethan as deeply flawed. That was bold, Eastwood said. It showed that heroes could be broken, complicated men. This idea, that a man could be both savior and threat, clearly resonated with Eastwood. You can see its fingerprints all over his own work, particularly in films like Unforgiven and Gran Torino, where his characters are haunted by the violence in their pasts. Visually, The Searchers made a major impact on Eastwood as well. He's long praised Ford's use of Monument Valley, turning vast landscapes into emotional backdrops for intimate drama. The film's iconic final shot, Wayne standing in the doorway alone as the door closes on him, is something Eastwood has referenced more than once. It's not just a beautiful frame, it's a powerful metaphor for a man who doesn't belong in the world he helped save. That image stuck with Eastwood, and similar moments can be found in The Outlaw Josie Wales and Pale Rider. Eastwood also credits The Searchers with expanding his understanding of storytelling. It was one of the first westerns to fully embrace moral gray areas. Ethan's relentless pursuit borders on vengeance, and his prejudice adds layers of discomfort. Yet, the film never gives easy answers. That willingness to wrestle with complexity is something Eastwood has always admired. It respected the audience, he once said. It didn't tell you what to think. Another reason The Searchers earns the #1 spot is the performance of John Wayne. While Eastwood's own acting style would eventually veer into grittier, more subdued territory, he never stopped appreciating Wayne's commanding screen presence. In The Searchers, Wayne gives one of his finest performances, stoic yet tortured, heroic yet unsettling. Eastwood often cites this as a turning point in Wayne's career and one of the main reasons the film still resonates. Eastwood's reverence for The Searchers isn't just nostalgic, it's professional. He has introduced screenings of the film, praised it in interviews, and even borrowed elements from it in his own movies. He called it a template for the modern Western, and you can feel its influence in everything from High Plains Drifter to Million Dollar Baby. For Eastwood, The Searchers isn't just a favorite movie, it's a foundational text, one that shaped how he sees the West, how he crafts characters, and how he tells stories. When asked to sum up what makes The Searchers so special, Eastwood once replied simply, "It stayed with me." And maybe that's the ultimate compliment, from a man who's made films that have stayed with audiences for generations. Clint Eastwood's 6 favorite movies tell us more than just what he enjoys watching. They reveal the roots of his storytelling soul. From the eerie tension of Invasion of the Body Snatchers to the sweeping grandeur of The Searchers, these films reflect the values he's always championed: grit, moral complexity, emotional truth, and cinematic craft. They shaped him as an actor, guided him as a director, and inspired him as a lifelong student of film. For fans of Eastwood, revisiting these classics isn't just a movie night, it's a masterclass in the cinema that forged a Hollywood legend,